The Barcarolle was not just a restaurant, it was a confessional booth with a wine list. It sat on the Brooklyn waterfront, all glass and reclaimed wood, staring down the throat of Manhattan during the day. Sunlight hit the water and bounced off the silverware, blinding the financial lunch crowd. At night, the lights dropped, the curtains drew, and the real clients arrived, the politicians, the judges, and the men who own the concrete beneath the city, the unseen guests. I am Ava Quinn. I am 25 years old, and I am a ghost in this machine. I orbit these tables in a black apron, refilling water glasses, clearing plates, and listening. But my real life is in the back, in the prep kitchen, where I fill in during the lunch crunch. I left culinary school 2 years ago, just shy of finishing, when my sister June's anxiety developed teeth. Now, my tips, and whatever I can scrape from the prep budget, pay for her therapy in our tiny apartment. I have a sensitivity. The chefs call it the nose, but it is more than that. I keep notebooks, spiral-bound and cheap, filled with figures, not recipes, but data. The exact temperature saffron turns bitter, the minute marker when garlic stops being sweet and starts to burn, how the humidity on a Tuesday in October changes the proofing time of the focaccia by 3%. It is how I make sense of the chaos. It is accountancy for the palate. The Barcarolle is technically owned by Moretti Foods, which is owned by the Moretti family. We never saw the father, Domenico Moretti. He was a myth, a shadow that stretched from the docks to the Capitol. But the son, Luca Moretti, he was the cold prince, 29 years old, educated at some expensive university, and in charge of the legitimate face of the empire, the marinas, the food distribution chains. He was quiet, polished, and, according to the staff, utterly terrifying in his stillness. The man I saw every day, however, was Trent Doyle. Trent was the manager. He was all cheap cologne and a smile that never reached his eyes. Trent had his hands everywhere. He skimmed tips, blaming the point-of-sale system for glitches. He had a special service fee for the unseen guests, a fee that never made it to the payroll. We all knew he was dirty. We also knew he was close to Rafael Castellano, the man who wanted the Moretti docs, the man who smiled too much in the newspapers. Tonight, the tension was different. Luca Moretti was here, in the private dining room overlooking the river. The kitchen was vibrating. Chef Marisol Reyes, usually calm, was plating with tweezers. The first course went out, a perfect scallop crudo. It came back, untouched. The second course, the risotto, it came back, one bite taken. The third, the veal chop, it came back. Trent Doyle burst through the kitchen doors, his face purple. He said it is all wrong. He said there is a strange smell, Marisol. What are you sending out? I was scrubbing a pot, my mind on June. I did not look up, but I said it. It is the oil. The kitchen stopped. Every pair of eyes locked on me. Trent walked over, slow, menacing. What did you say? Quinn. The finishing oil, I said, my voice too clear. The new batch of olive oil that came in this morning? I told you it was fake. It smells wrong. Trent's eyes narrowed. He remembered. I had stopped him when he was signing the invoice. I told him it was rancid, that it smelled dusty, acidic. He had waved me off. You, he hissed, jabbing a finger at my chest. You are finished. You are accusing me of bad product during Mr. Moretti's dinner. Get your things. You are out. My stomach dropped. Fired, no job, no rent, no money for June's medication. My hands started to shake. Just then, my phone vibrated in my apron. A text from June. Cannot breathe. The walls cannot breathe. A different kind of panic, cold and sharp, cut through the fear of Trent. I looked at the manager, but I did not see him. I saw my sister hyperventilating in our apartment. I turned my back on Trent. I walked away from him toward the prep station. Did you hear me, Ava? Trent shouted. I ignored him. I grabbed a small saucepan. On the lowest burner, a pot of simple chicken stock was simmering. Left over from lunch prep, I ladled some in. I grabbed a lemon, sliced it, Squeezed. I ripped a handful of rosemary. It was a poor man's soup, the thing my mother used to make for us when we were sick. The smell of it, sharp and clean, cut through the heavy kitchen air. It was the only smell that could calm June when the panic hit. I was going to run it home to her. I poured the soup into a cheap plastic container. As I turned, Owen, the bartender, was standing there, holding the rejected veal chop, his hands shaking. "He will not eat. He's just staring at the plate. Trent will kill me." Luca Moretti, and he was still in there, still hungry, still smelling it. I looked at the plastic container in my hand. I looked at Owen. I looked at Trent, who was on the phone, probably calling security to have me thrown out. I made a decision. It was not a smart decision. It was the decision of a desperate woman. I grabbed a clean bowl. I poured June's soup into it. "Give me the tray," I said to Owen. "Ava, what are you doing? That is not on the menu." "He's hungry," I said, "and this is clean." I walked out of the kitchen carrying the bowl of simple soup. Trent saw me. "Ava, stop." I pushed open the door to the private room. It was silent. Luca Moretti sat at the head of the table. He was exactly as they said, cold, still, and handsome in a way that hurt to look at. His suit was perfect. Beside him sat a woman I recognized instantly, Elena Voss, the Moretti lawyer, their consigliere. She wore a severe black dress, and her eyes missed nothing. I set the bowl down in front of him. Luca Moretti looked at the soup. He looked at me. His eyes were dark gray, the color of the river at dawn. "What is this?" His voice was quiet, cultured. "Chicken soup," I said. "Lemon and rosemary. It is all I had." Elena Voss started to raise a hand, probably to dismiss me, but Luca Moretti picked up his spoon. He did not ask anyone to taste it for him. He lifted the spoon, smelled the steam. He paused. Then he put the spoon in his mouth. His eyes closed for just a second. He took another bite, and another. I stood there, frozen, watching the most powerful man in Brooklyn eat my sister's sick day soup. He ate the entire bowl. He did not cough. He did not grimace. He placed the spoon down. "Thank you," he said. He looked at me. Really looked at me, with an expression I could not read. It was half suspicion, half gratitude. I nodded, took the empty bowl, and backed out of the room. Trent was waiting in the hallway, his face white with rage. "You are insane! You are finished!" It was the almonds. I whispered. My mind was racing, connecting the smells, the dusty, acidic note in the oil, the strange smell Luca detected. "What?" Trent snapped. "The finishing oil," I said, stronger now. "The one you bought from the new supplier. It did not just smell rancid. It smelled like bitter almonds." Trent's face went from red to gray. Even he, a culinary idiot, knew what bitter almonds meant. It was the smell of cyanide. A precursor. Not enough to kill. Not yet. Just enough to test a threshold. To send a message. The door to the private room opened. Elena Voss stepped out. She looked at Trent, then at me. "Mr. Doyle," she said, her voice like ice. "Mr. Moretti would like a word. Alone." Trent swallowed, adjusted his tie, and walked past her into the room. A dead man walking. Elena Voss turned to me. I was still holding the empty soup bowl. "Ava Quinn, you work prep and tables." It was not a question. She knew. "Yes," I managed. "Wait here." She went back into the room. I leaned against the wall, my knees weak. I had to get to June, but I also knew I was not fired. You do not get fired when you feed the prince and identify the poison. I had stepped out of the ghost life and into the spotlight, and it felt terrible. I just wanted to keep my job. I just wanted to pay for June's doctors. I did not want to be involved in whatever war this was. But Trent Doyle was skimming. He was manipulating the point-of-sale system. He was buying fake oil that smelled like almonds. He was dangerous. And I, apparently, was dangerous to him. I never saw Trent leave the private room. Miles away, in a dark office, Rafael Castellano read the text message on his phone. It was from his man inside Barcarolle. It was one short, damning sentence. The waitress smelled it. I did not get fired. Trent Doyle walked out of that private room an hour after I had served the soup, his face the color of old parchment. He did not look at me. Elena Voss simply said, "Your shift ends at midnight. Be here at 9 tomorrow morning. Use the kitchen entrance." I went home to June, my hands still smelling of lemon and rosemary, my heart pounding a hole in my chest. The next morning, the kitchen was buzzing, but Trent was nowhere to be seen. His absence felt heavier, more threatening than his presence. Chef Marisol Reyes, a woman whose face was usually set in a permanent frown of concentration, pulled me aside as I was tying my apron. "The Blue Harbor Gala," she said, her voice low. She was wiping her hands on a clean cloth, a nervous habit I had never seen her use. "It is in 2 weeks. It is happening here. Luca Moretti is the sponsor." I knew the gala. It was the city's biggest charity night. The mayor would be there. Senators. The kind of New York money that owns the zip codes. It meant media, cameras, and politicians. And, Marisol's tense shoulders implied, it meant rivals. Rafael Castellano would be there, smiling, donating money he earned by skimming off the docks, all while trying to gut the Moretti family. "You need to understand something about Mr. Moretti," Marisol continued, leading me into the massive walk-in refrigerator. The cold air was a relief. "He does not eat. Not like other people." She explained it. Years ago, his mother died. It was not an illness. It was poison, served in her own home, in her own kitchen. Since that day, Luca Moretti lived by his nose, and his nose trusted nothing. "He has a taster," she whispered, the words fogging in the cold. "A man who shadows him. He eats everything first, everything." My blood went cold, but last night, I said, my voice barely audible, "My soup, he ate it. I did not see a taster." "Exactly," Marisol said, meeting my eyes. "He just ate it. That is why Trent is suspended, and you are here. He trusts your nose." She pointed to a crate of Belgian endives. "Elena Voss wants us to check all incoming inventory. Starting now. You and me. Off the books." She pulled me into the dry storage room, the air thick with the scent of dried bay leaves and yeast. "Trent's orders," she said, tapping a heavy ledger. 10 cases of finishing oil, 5 kilos of pure ground almonds, all from a new vendor. We opened one of the oil tins, the same acidic, dusty smell that had clung to the veal chop. It was rancid, but it was hiding something else. We opened the bag of almonds. I leaned in, inhaling deeply. They were not sweet, they were bitter. The sharp, chemical smell of that trace poison, hiding in plain sight. "They do not match the invoice for the Marcona almonds we ordered," I said, my voice tight. "This is cheap filler, industrial grade." "It is Castellano's import line," Marisol said grimly. "Trent has been poisoning the well, slow and steady, testing." If the kitchen was compromised, the front of the house was too. Trent was suspended, not fired, which meant he still had allies inside. During my next shift, I watched the point-of-sale system. It was the restaurant's electronic brain, and Trent had been the one to program it. When certain tables cashed out, the tables for the unseen guests, a special service fee was automatically added. It was a fee the customers expected, a discreet charge for privacy. But watching the logs, I saw that the system diverted that percentage. It never hit the restaurant's main accounting. I saw the names on the reservations, recognizing them from whispers at the docks, Castellano's associates. Trent was not just skimming tips, he was running a secondary ledger for Moretti's rival, right under Luca's nose. I did what I always do. I took notes. On my dinner break, I used my cracked phone camera and took pictures of the transaction logs from the back office computer. The pattern was clear. The Trent and Castellano connection was not just gossip. It was documented in dollars and cents. 2 days later, Elena Voss requested my presence, not at the restaurant, but at her office, a glass tower that looked down on the Barcarolle and the river. She was polite, sharp, and did not waste time. "My sister is not part of this," I said, before she could even speak. June's anxiety had spiked since the night I came home late. smelling of fear and expensive soap. "I agree," Elena said. She did not show surprise. She pushed a business card across the vast mahogany desk. "This is Dr. Ramirez. He's the best specialist in anxiety disorders in the state. He does not normally take new patients. He will see June tomorrow. My office will handle the expense." I stared at the card. This level of care was a fantasy. It was a lifeline I could never, ever afford. Why? "We protect our assets, Ava, and you are now an asset." Her eyes were clear, holding no pity, only fact. "But know this. We are handling the financial and logistical side. Your job is the kitchen. We do not." She paused, finding the right word. "Mix the two. Your sister is civilian. She will remain so." I picked up the card, the thick stock heavy in my hand. I felt sick with relief and sick with the price of it. "She is not bait," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "If you ever use her—" "Mister, Moretti does not wage war using sick children," Elena said, cutting me off. "That is Castellano's tactic. Go, take care of your sister, then come back and take care of the gala." I returned to the kitchen with a new title, Marisol. Bless her, he had promoted me. I was no longer a waitress. I was prep supervisor. It was a $5 an hour raise and a mountain of new responsibility. One afternoon, I was showing a new hire, a young man named Leo, how to properly caramelize onions for the gala's soup base. We had hundreds of pounds to get through. "You do not use your eyes," I told him, stirring the massive copper pot. "You use your ears. Listen." We stood in the noisy kitchen, but we focused on the pot. "Hear that?" I asked. "The high, fast sizzle? That is water evaporating. The sugar is not ready." We waited, stirring. The sound deepened, slowed down, became a low, gentle hiss. "Now," I said, turning the heat down a fraction. "That is the sound of the sugars releasing. That is when it is sweet. Any longer, and it burns." I turned to grab the time, and he was there. Luca Moretti. He was leaning against the steel prep table, watching us, not with the cold suspicion of the private dining room, but with a quiet, unguarded intensity. He must have been standing there for minutes. The kitchen crew gave him a wide berth, but he seemed unaware of them. "That is how my mother used to cook," he said. His voice was so quiet, the kitchen sounds almost swallowed it. "She said you had to listen to the food." I froze, a bundle of time in my hand. "She was right, Mr. Moretti." "Luca," he corrected, gently. He looked at the onions, which were now a rich, perfect amber. "It smells clean, like your soup." He looked at me, his gray eyes holding mine. I have not smelled a kitchen smell clean in 10 years. I did not know what to say. I just nodded. He watched me for another moment, his gaze unwavering, then he turned and left as silently as he arrived. But the space where he stood felt warm. He was not just the cold prince. He was a man who remembered his mother's kitchen. The peace did not last. The next night, during the dinner rush, a new ticket printed from the machine. Table 12, VIP. 1 amuse-bouche, guest request almond-infused oil. My blood went icy. Table 12 was Councilman Davies, a key political ally for the Blue Harbor Project. Marisol was on the line, calling out orders. I ran to the pass, where the amuse-bouche station was. Leo was already plating it, reaching for the wrong oil, the bottle Trent had ordered, the one we had not yet thrown out. "No!" I yelled. "The order was a probe, a test." I grabbed the tray from Leo's hands. "That oil is flagged. Use the reserve." "But the ticket says almond." He protested. "I do not care what the ticket says. Do it." I dumped the tiny poison bite into the trash. I remade it myself in 30 seconds, using the good oil, the one I had verified that morning. I sent it out. 10 minutes later, Councilman Davies was fine, but the gossip started. A food blogger at the next table, Table 11, had overheard the commotion. She tweeted, "Drama at Barcarolle. Chef saves councilman from bad oil. What is happening at Moretti's restaurant?" Castellano was testing our defenses, and he had gotten a reaction. The next morning, Trent Doyle was back. He was not smiling. He cornered me by the staff lockers. He was furious, his face blotchy. "You think you are clever," he sneered. "You think you run this place now." He shoved a piece of paper into my chest. It was an official memo, stamped with the Moretti Foods corporate logo, effective immediately. By order of the board, you are reassigned. Dish pit, 8-hour shift, starting now. The humiliation burned, hot and sharp. The dish pit, it was a message. I was back where I started, but lower. I changed into the heavy rubber apron. I was scrubbing a scorched sheet pan, my knuckles raw, when Marisol found me. She looked furious. She grabbed the steel wool scrubber from my hand and threw it into the sink. "You are not a dishwasher," she said, her voice vibrating with rage. "Trent's orders," I said, my voice dead. "He said it came from the board." "Trent manages the floor," Marisol said, her voice like steel. "I manage the kitchen, and in my kitchen, you are quality control." She ripped the memo from the wall where Trent had pinned it. "Trent does not have access to the dry storage anymore. I had the locks changed." She pressed a small, cold key into my hand. "This is the master key to the dry stores. Nothing goes in or out of my kitchen without your nose." Understood. I looked at the key. It was heavy. It was trust. Understood, chef. That night, long after the dinner service had ended, Luca Moretti found me in the dry storage. I was sitting on the floor, surrounded by bags of flour, logging the new shipments in my notebook. "He demoted you," Luca said. It was not a question. "Marisol promoted me back," I replied, not looking up. I heard him shift, almost a sigh. "Trent is a symptom. The disease is Castellano. He wants the gala." "He wants to poison the gala," I said, stating the fact. "No," Luca said. I looked up. He was standing in the doorway, the hallway light framing him. "He does not want to kill anyone. That is too messy. He wants to humiliate me. He wants the mayor, the press, and my father's old allies to see me react." I finally understood. The poisoning was not the goal. The fear was the goal. Castellano wanted to trigger Luca's trauma in front of the entire city. "The almonds," I whispered, standing up. "He wants you to smell the almonds." "Yes." Luca looked at me, his gray eyes searching my face, stripped of all pretense. "The night you brought me that soup, it was the first food I have eaten without a taster in 10 years, because it smelled honest." He took a step into the small room. The air smelled of dried herbs and yeast and him. "I need you to consult on the gala menu. I need you to build it from the ground up." He took a breath. "I need you to make it honest. I need you to make it safe." I looked at the man in the $1,000 suit, asking a prep cook to save him from his ghosts. "I will," I said. "I will not let him win." The week before the Blue Harbor Gala was a quiet war, fought on 2 distinct fronts. Elena Voss moved through the city's legal jungle, filing preemptive compliance reports with the health department, leaking positive press about the Barcarolle sourcing, and ensuring every permit was triple verified. Her war was one of paper cuts and legal shields. My war, and Marisol's war, was fought with steam, fire, and ice. The kitchen was no longer just a place of creation, it was a fortress. We redesigned the entire gala menu, not just for flavor, but for security. We created a system of hidden codes. Each prep station was assigned a specific, proprietary scent marker, the guard manger. The cold station used a specific hybrid of Vietnamese and sweet basil. The grill station used smoke from precisely measured applewood chips. The pastry station used a vanilla bean, sourced only from Madagascar. Any cross-contamination, any scent that did not belong, would ring an alarm bell only my nose could hear. My cheap, spiral-bound notebook became the strategic map. I stopped just tracking temperatures and cooking times. I started tracking the truth. I logged every delivery, every batch number, every supplier name. I took a micro-sample of every oil, every spice, every bag of flour, and stored them in tiny, labeled glass jars. I created a scent map of the kitchen, a baseline profile of what safe smelled like. If Rafael Castellano wanted to weaponize bitter almonds, He was launching a direct assault against the one sense I had perfected. The first breach did not come from the kitchen. It came from the bar. Owen, the head bartender, was a good man. He was the first to offer a kind word, the one who made sure the waitstaff had cold water during a brutal double shift. He always asked about June, but I saw him 2 nights before the gala, his hands shaking so badly he almost dropped a case of tonic. He was in the liquor store room, unpacking a new shipment of orgeat syrup, almond syrup. It was not our usual brand. I found him later, sitting on an overturned keg in the cold room, his head in his hands. He was pale, sweating in the chill. He was staring at the case of expensive Kraft almond syrup. "Trent's order," he mumbled, not even looking up. I picked up one of the heavy glass bottles. The seal was fresh, but the aroma wafting from the cardboard was too strong, too sharp. It had that same metallic, bitter spike I had smelled in the fake olive oil, masked this time by an overwhelming sweetness. "He wants you to use this for the gala," I asked, my voice low. Owen broke. He put his head down and just sobbed. A grown man in a black vest, utterly terrified. "I owe money, Ava, a lot. My mother's medical bills, the interest. It is bad. Trent found out. He covered it. He paid it off." "And in return," I asked, my voice flat. He just said I had to, make a few special cocktails for Castellano's guests. He said it was just a flavor, just to make Luca nervous, just to make him react." He was crying, overwhelmed by the shame. I saw June in his panic, that same feeling of being trapped by circumstances you cannot control. "He is using you, Owen," I said, putting my hand on his shoulder. His whole body was shaking. "He's not going to stop at this. You know what this syrup smells like? It is not just flavor, it is a weapon." He nodded, miserable. "There is another way," I said, making a decision. "You talk to Elena Voss. You tell her everything. The debt, the threats, the syrup. She can protect you. She can keep you safe. But you have to tell the truth. Right now." I did not wait for an answer. I took him by the arm, led him out of the storeroom, and up the back stairs to the office where Elena was working late. Buried in spreadsheets, I saved him from ruin. I traded protection for his loyalty, not threats. Castellano must have felt the shift, the loss of his inside man. He must have known his plan with the cocktails was dead. So he decided to hit me where I lived. The next afternoon, June came to the Barcarolle, Dr. Ramirez's sessions. The ones Elena had arranged were helping. June was calmer, brighter. She was bringing me a scarf she had knitted. I was on my 30-minute break, sitting with her in the family booth at the back, the one the staff used. That is when they walked in. 2 men. They were not finance types. They wore cheap suits that pulled too tight across the shoulders, and their eyes were dead. They did not look at the menu. They sat in the booth directly across from us, flanking us, and they just stared at June. June's breath hitched. Her hand, the one holding the scarf, flew to her throat. The walls were closing in again. "Ava," she whispered, her eyes wide with panic. "Who are they?" "They are looking at me." The men grinned. They wanted me to break. They wanted me to scream, to run, to cause a scene, to prove I was unstable. I looked across the dining room. Marisol was at the pass, watching. Her hand was on the house phone. I shook my head, a tiny, almost invisible gesture. "No, do not call security. Do not escalate." I turned my back to the men, blocking June's view of them with my own body. "Hey," I said, my voice impossibly calm, impossibly light. "Forget them. They are nobody. Look at me. Tell me about this scarf. What stitch is this? It is beautiful." "Ava, I cannot breathe. "Yes, you can," I said, my voice a low, steady anchor. "You are breathing right now. You are safe. You are with me. Now tell me about the wool. Where did you get this color?" I kept talking on. I did not leave my shift. I did not falter. I described the recipe for the bread we were baking, the precise smell of the yeast, the warmth of the oven, the way the salt crystallized on the crust. I built a wall of words, a wall of sensory details, between my sister and the monsters in the cheap suits. The men were getting agitated. Their intimidation was not working. Suddenly, the restaurant's front door opened, and the air temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Luca Moretti walked in. He did not look at the men, did not look at me. He walked directly to our booth. "June," he said, his voice softer than I had ever heard it. "I heard you were here. I wanted to thank you for the soup your sister made." June looked up, her eyes wide, starstruck. "She was worried about you," Luca continued, as if he and June were the only two people in the room. "The air in here is terrible. It is stuffy." He gestured to the window. "Would you like to see the boats? The air is better on the docks." He offered his hand. June, miraculously, took it. Luca led her outside, past the stunned men, onto the private Moretti pier that jutted out into the river. I followed, my heart pounding. The two men made a move to follow, but Luca's driver, a mountain of a man I had never seen before, simply stepped into their path. Luca took June to the end of the pier. The wind was cold, sharp with the smell of salt and diesel. "Breathe," he told her. Not as a command, but as an invitation. "It is just air." June took a shaky breath. "My mother," Luca said, his voice quiet, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. "She loved lemon. She used to make these lemon biscotti. They were hard as rocks. She said they were perfect for the docks, because you had to dip them in coffee to eat them. She liked the noise they made." June was listening, her breathing evening out. "She got scared sometimes, too," he said, his voice barely a whisper against the wind. "Of the noise, of the city. She would bake to make the world quiet, to make it smell right." He looked at June, his gray eyes gentle. "It is okay to be scared. It is not okay to let them win." I stood back, watching this cold prince, this man haunted by poison, gently talking my sister down from a panic attack. He understood her fear. He spoke its language. He brought June back inside, handed her over to me, and then walked over to the men's table. He did not say a word. He just stood there, looking down at them. The men paid their bill in cash and fled. Trent and Castellano were losing. They got desperate. Trent, still technically suspended but pulling strings from the outside, went after my credibility. He knew I was the one verifying the inventory. The next day, Marisol found it, a tiny black dot camera, hidden in the ventilation grate of the dry storage. It was pointed right at the shelves where I kept my notebooks and my samples. An hour later, an email went out to the Moretti Foods corporate board, copying Elena. It was from Trent. Concerns about inventory integrity. He attached a video file. It was me, late at night in the storage room. The footage was grainy, time-stamped from 2 nights prior. It showed me opening a bag of flour, taking a sample. Then it cut. It spliced to footage of me, relabeling a crate of olive oil. It was a complete fabrication, a low-tech, clumsy edit. It was designed to make it look like I was the one sabotaging the kitchen. "He's framing me," I said, my voice flat. "We were in the office. Me, Elena, and Marisol. He's trying to muddy the water, to discredit our key witness." "He is stupid," I said. I pushed my spiral notebook across the desk. "The real one. The nose notebook?" Elena opened it. "That footage shows me checking the flour at 9:40 in the evening." I pointed. "But look at my logbook, signed by the night receiver. That flour shipment did not arrive until 11 at night. The video is faked. It is out of sequence." I flipped the page. "And that oil crate, look at the invoice number. That is last week's oil. It was shipped out 3 days ago. He used old footage. He got sloppy." I had cross-referenced my notes with the building's official delivery manifests, my accounting, my truth. The night before the gala, the kitchen was a hive. We were prepping for 500 guests, canapes, amuse-bouches, a 5-course meal. We were running on caffeine and adrenaline. At 6 in the evening, the final crucial delivery arrived, the scallops, the beef tenderloin, and the replacement almonds for the pastry station, from a supplier I had personally vetted. I opened the crate. The smell hit me like a fist, that acidic, bitter chemical spike. Castellano had bypassed our supplier. He had sent the poison. As I was slamming the crate shut, Marisol's cell phone rang. She listened, her face draining of all color. She started speaking in rapid, terrified Spanish. Mi hijo. She hung up. Ava, she whispered, her hands grabbing her coat. My son? They are at my sister's house in Queens. They said the gas is leaking. They told me to go home. Now, it was a threat, a direct, vicious threat to her family. Go, I said. Go. Now, call Elena. Go. She looked at me, torn, her eyes on the massive wall of tickets. The gala. I have it. Go, I yelled. She ran, and I was alone. I was the prep supervisor, 25 years old, and I was now the acting executive chef for the Blue Harbor Gala. I threw the poisoned almonds into the biohazard lockbox and slammed it shut. I looked at the chaotic kitchen. The entire staff was looking at me, waiting for orders, their faces pale with panic. I took a deep breath. Leo, we are 86ing the almond tart. We are making lemon biscotti. Now, June, wine me crun, I yelled to my sister, who was polishing glasses. You are on biscotti with Leo, like we practiced. I started calling out commands, changing the menu on the fly, substituting, replanning, my voice clear and loud. Luca appeared in the kitchen doorway. He had heard. He knew Marisol was gone. He knew the bad shipment had arrived. The kitchen was chaos. But he just looked at me. Can you do this? He asked. Can you make it safe? Yes, I said, my voice hoarse. Good. He came closer, his presence a shield against the panic. Ava, if you do this, if you make it through tonight, I am not using a taster. My head snapped up. I will eat whatever you put in front of me, Anan, he said. Ian, his voice low and intense, in the middle of that ballroom, in front of him, in front of everyone. We end this. Tonight. It was not a request. It was a vow. He was handing me his life, his trauma, and betting it on my nose. My phone buzzed. A text from Elena. Marisol and family are secure. My people have them. The trap is set, but Castellano is desperate. One mistake, Ava. One bad bite, and this place is shut down. There will be arrests. There might be blood. You must choose. Are you sure you can do this? I looked at the heavy steel chef's knife in my hand. I thought of the violence Castellano represented, the shadows Domenico Moretti used to live in. I put the knife down. I picked up my whisk. I chose my weapon. I texted Elena back one word. Yes. The Barcarolle was not a restaurant tonight. It was a stage, flooded with harsh, white television lights that murdered every shadow. The air thrummed. Not with conversation, but with the clicks and whirs of cameras. Flashbulbs went off like small, silent fireworks, catching the diamonds on the throats of senators' wives. The live stream was active, broadcasting every arrival to the entire city. The mayor was there, his laugh too loud. Politicians clinked glasses, their smiles wide and brittle. And then, Rafael Castellano arrived. He moved through the room like a shark accustomed to warm waters. He was immaculate in a tuxedo, a vision of civic duty, shaking hands with the mayor, presenting an oversized check for the Blue Harbor charity. He smiled for the cameras, the picture of generous philanthropy. Across the room, Luca Moretti stood near the main podium, his face a perfect cold mask. He watched Castellano. I stood just inside the kitchen's double doors, my white chef's jacket stiff and unfamiliar. I watched everyone. It was time. The first course, Luca's course. I plated it myself. I had checked every ingredient, smelled every component. Saffron risotto, the color of a sunrise, infused with a lemon broth I had simmered for 6 hours. It was simple, clean and honest. I put the single white bowl on a silver tray. I did not hand it to a server. I smoothed my apron, pushed open the doors, and walked into the blinding light. The room quieted. The cameras, sensing a deviation, turned 100 cell phones lifted, capturing the image of prep cook in her whites, marching a single bowl of food to the head table. I could feel Castellano's eyes on me. I could feel the smirk he was hiding. He expected the ritual. He expected the taster. He expected the fear. I placed the bowl in front of Luca. His taster, a nervous, thin man named Franco, immediately stood up, reaching for the plate to perform his duty. Luca lifted his left hand, a small, firm gesture. "No, Franco, not tonight." Franco froze, his hand hovering in the air. Elena Voss, sitting to Luca's left, watched the room, her expression unreadable. Castellano's smirk tightened. He leaned forward, anticipating the rejection, the panic. I looked at Luca. He looked at me. This was the vow we made, now made public. He picked up his fork. He did not lift the bowl to smell it. He did not hesitate. He dipped the fork into the risotto and brought it to his mouth. A sound went through the ballroom, a collective, sharp intake of breath, louder than the string quartet. Luca chewed, swallowed. He took a second bite. He took a third. He finished the bite, placed his fork down gently, and then he looked up. He looked past me, past the politicians, directly at Rafael Castellano, and Luca nodded, a small, slow acknowledgement. It was not a thank you. It was a challenge. He was free. I returned to the kitchen, my legs feeling like water, but my mind like ice. The main rush of canapés had begun. Trays were flying out. "Station 3, I called, my voice sharp. "Let me see the shrimp skewers. Now." A server was loading a tray from the auxiliary station, a small prep table we had set up in the service hallway to handle the overflow. It was staffed by a new temp, a man Trent Doyle had hired just before his suspension. I walked toward the tray. I did not even have to get close. The smell hit me like a physical blow, that sharp, metallic, chemical sweetness, bitter almonds, buried under the scent of chili and grilled mango. "No," I shouted. "No." The server stopped. The temp at the station looked up, his eyes wide with fake innocence. I did not pause. I grabbed the heavy silver tray. I turned, marched it past the shocked kitchen staff to the main disposal unit, and with a crash, I dumped all 50 skewers into the bin. "That tray is contaminated," I announced, my voice ringing with an authority I did not know I possessed. The kitchen went silent. "Ava, what are you doing?" the temp stammered, rushing toward me. "That tray was for the mayor's table." "It is poison," I said, loud enough for every cook to hear. "Leo, June, the biscotti. Now, trays, go." I had planned for this. My backup, the lemon biscotti, the ones Luca told me his mother used to bake, were cooling on massive racks. We had baked 500 of them. They were safe. They were clean. They were the truth. We replated in less than 30 seconds, replacing the smell of poison with the bright, honest scent of lemon. As I sent the new trays out, June ran from the pastry corner. Elena Voss was right behind her, a protective shadow. June was not panicking. Her eyes were clear and bright. "Ava," she whispered, and she grabbed my hand. She pressed something small and warm into my palm. "Mom's." It was an old, faded red elastic hair tie, the one our mother had always kept on her wrist when she cooked. It was June's ultimate comfort object, her bua bin tin, her charm against the panic. "You need it more," June said. I closed my fist around it. It was armor. "Thank you. Now go back to Elena. Do not leave her side." I turned back to the pass, in the ballroom. Owen, the bartender, was walking to the podium. He was scheduled to introduce the charity's main speaker. He looked pale, but he looked steady. He tapped the microphone. "Good evening," he said, his voice echoing through the silent room. "Before we continue, we have a short presentation from one of our former sponsors." Elena, from her seat, must have signaled the tech booth. The two massive screens on either side of the stage, the ones showing the Blue Harbor logo, flickered to black. Then, a new image appeared. It was grainy, shaky cell phone footage, taken in the alley behind the Barcarolle. It showed Trent Doyle. He was taking a thick white envelope of cash from one of Castellano's men, one of the men who had intimidated June. The audio was suddenly crystal clear, piped through the expensive sound system. "Just get the oil onto the trays," Trent's voice sneered. "Make the prince choke. Castellano wants a show." A new sound erupted, a shriek of feedback, and then a voice, booming with rage. "You useless fool." It was Rafael Castellano, and he was on his feet, staring at the screen, his face purple. He was screaming at Trent, who was cowering at a staff table near the back. Castellano's microphone, the one on his table for the speeches, was live. It was a hot mic. "You were supposed to control one waitress, you idiot," he roared, the sound broadcast to every corner of the room, to every camera, to the entire city live stream. The philanthropist was gone, replaced by the raging fool beneath. Chaos. Castellano's men knew the trap had sprung. The temp from the auxiliary station, the one who had poisoned the shrimp, saw his escape routes blocked. He panicked. He made a desperate, final move. He bolted for the kitchen. I was standing in the doorway, the dividing line between the light and the heat. He saw me, and he saw the massive stockpot of risotto base simmering, the source for the entire night. He pulled a small glass vial from his jacket pocket, the concentrate. He lunged, his arm pulling back, aiming to throw the vial, to contaminate everything, to create the mass poisoning he had failed to start. I smelled it. The rush of air as he pulled the vial from his pocket released a wave of that bitter, chemical smell. My instincts screamed. I moved to intercept, but Luca was faster. He had been walking toward the kitchen when the screens lit up. He saw the lunge. He did not throw a punch. He did not shout. He moved his body, his expensive tuxedo, and planted himself directly between me and the attacking man. The man slammed into Luca's chest. The vial flew from his hand, tumbling end over end, straight toward the pot. Just as the man hit Luca, I saw him, at the far edge of the ballroom, standing in the one shadow the lights could not kill, near a service exit, Domenico Moretti, the father, the shadow. He was not looking at the fight. He was not looking at Castellano. He was looking at the empty, clean risotto bowl at his son's place setting. He was watching his son, standing unharmed, protecting his kitchen, protecting me. And Domenico Moretti smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was sad and tired and proud. I did not watch the father. I watched the vial. I dove, my hand shooting out, my fingers closing around the small glass bottle just centimeters before it hit the broth. The glass was cold. I held it up, my hand shaking, my fist clenched tight around my mother's hair tie and the vial of poison. The cameras were on me, swarming the kitchen door, their lenses like 1,000 unblinking eyes. They filmed me holding the vial. They filmed the temp being hauled to his feet by Luca's driver. Luca straightened his jacket. He looked at the man on the floor, then at the shocked faces of the press. "Excuse me," Luca called out, his voice perfectly calm. "Is the health inspector here, Inspector Rodriguez? I believe we have an urgent contamination issue to report." A man in a sharp suit, who had been coincidentally standing at the bar, stepped forward, his badge already in his hand. "Right here, Mr. Moretti. I will take that vial, Miss Quinn." Elena had planned for everything. The ballroom was madness. Castellano was trying to push his way to an exit, blocked by a wall of reporters. Trent was being quietly, but firmly, handcuffed by 2 police officers who had materialized at Elena's signal. Luca Moretti walked back to the podium. He took the microphone from Owen's stunned hand. "My apologies for the interruption," Luca said. The room, the live stream, the city went silent. "It seems we had a sourcing issue, a problem of integrity." He looked at me, standing in the kitchen doorway, covered in sweat, my fist still clenched. He motioned for me to come forward. I wanted to run. I wanted to hide in the walk-in, but I uncurled my fingers, put the vial in my apron pocket, and walked out, into the light. "For the past 10 years, Lucas said, his voice raw, honest, "I have not trusted the food I eat. Tonight, I did. because the woman standing next to me, Miss Ava Quinn, her head of culinary integrity, advised on this entire meal. She calls it the safe menu. He gestured to the lemon biscotti now on every table. What you're eating tonight is not just food, it is the truth. The barcarolle is, as of tonight, a symbol not just of fine dining, but of complete, radical transparency. One person, a jaded food critic, started clapping, then another, then the entire room erupted. The mayor, the senators, the money, the press. They were clapping because the show was good, but they were also clapping because they were safe. They were clapping for the truth. The applause from the gala was still a dull ringing in my ears when the backlash began. The lights were barely down before Rafael Castellano's legal team filed 3, maybe 4, injunctions against the barcarolle, claiming defamation, slander, and emotional distress. It was a cloud of ink from a wounded squid, a desperate move to stall for time. The real poison, however, was just starting to seep. Sometime after midnight, Trent Doyle, who had apparently slipped his handcuffs at the precinct with the ease of a man who knew which palms to grease, was officially a fugitive, and he was loud. Anonymous food blogs, burner social media accounts, and the comment sections of the legitimate news articles were all suddenly flooded. The story was simple and vicious. I was the poison cook. I had framed Trent. I was Luca Moretti's new mistress, a power-hungry cook who had orchestrated the entire event to get ahead. My name and my face, which had been plastered across every live stream, was now inseparable from the words poison and fraud. My shift ended at 3 a.m. I was walking the dark, empty streets toward my apartment, my feet aching, my mind numb with exhaustion, when my phone rang, an unknown number. I almost did not answer. "Miss Quinn," the voice was old, heavy as wet concrete, and it carried an authority that chilled me to the bone. It was not Luca. "This is Domenico Moretti. Walk to the end of the pier, the one by your restaurant. I am waiting." The line went dead. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was the shadow, the myth. I was terrified. But as I stood under that flickering streetlight, I was more afraid of what would happen if I said no. I turned around and walked back to the dark, silent waterfront. He was there, just a silhouette against the distant, glittering lights of Manhattan. He was standing at the very end of the pier, the same one Luca had taken June to, wearing a simple dark overcoat. He was shorter than I expected. He did not look like a monster. He looked like an old man, tired of the cold. "He's a fool, that Castellano," Domenico said, his voice quiet. He did not look at me. He was watching the dark, oily water slap against the pilings. "He uses poison. It is the weapon of a coward. It is the weapon of a woman." I bristled, my exhaustion turning to a sharp, cold anger. "Sir." He turned to me then. His eyes were Luca's eyes, the same gray as the river, but without any of the gentleness, they were stones. "My wife. Luca's mother, she was poisoned. Did he tell you that?" "He told me she died," I whispered. "She was poisoned," he repeated, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "In her sister's kitchen, not even our home. A small thing, a celebration. Someone jealous. An old debt. It did not matter. It destroyed my son. It broke him. He has not eaten a meal in peace in 10 years, not until your soup." He took a step closer. The air smelled of old wool, expensive tobacco, and the cold, saltless river. "I watched him tonight. I watched him eat your food. You gave him back something I thought was gone forever. I will not let that history repeat. I will not let Castellano, or that rat Trent, take that from him again." We have the evidence," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "Elena has the videos, the logs, Owen is testifying, the police—" "Paper," Domenico scoffed, with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Paper burns. Cops can be bought. I am offering you the old way, a permanent solution. Castellano has docs have accidents, Trent Doyle can be found. I make one call, and this is over. Your sister is safe. You are safe. Luca is safe. Forever." The offer hung in the freezing air. It was a simple, brutal transaction. My silence for their safety, the end of Castellano, the end of the threat. It was the Mafia way. It was the way of shadows. I looked at the man who had built an empire on that precise logic. I thought of Luca, his gentle voice talking June down from her panic. I thought of my whisk, my notebook, my kitchen. No, I said. Domenico's eyes narrowed. No, sir. We do not win that way. If you make him disappear, we just become him. We prove him right. The only way to win is to expose him. We win with the light. We win with the truth. I tapped my temple, my mind clear for the first time in hours. We win with my nose and with Elena's laws. He stared at me for a long, silent minute. I could hear the hum of the city across the water. I thought very clearly that he might have me thrown from the pier. He has chosen well, Domenico said, and a strange, sad smile touched his lips. He turned and walked away from me, toward the shore. Do not fail him. As I walked back up the pier, my legs trembling, a black car pulled up to the curb. Luca got out. He must have been watching, waiting. He met me halfway, his face pale in the dim light. He did not ask what his father had said. He did not have to. He just looked at my face. He offered you the old way. Luca stated, it was not a question. I told him no, I said, my breath fogging in the air between us. He reached out, his gloveless hand stopping just short of my face, his fingers almost grazing my cheek. You are right, Ava. We win with the light. He finally let his hand rest on my shoulder, his grip firm, grounding me. Elena is ready. The next morning, Elena Voss struck. It was not a quiet move. It was a detonation. She did not just file a response to Castellano's lawsuits. She held a press conference. She presented the city and the district attorney's office with the entire case, Owen's full recorded testimony. My notebooks, the nose notebook, the cross-referenced invoices, the forged delivery manifests, the real video from the dry storage, showing my meticulous logging, the doctored video from Trent, which she had a forensic expert analyze to show the clumsy splices, the point-of-sale data, proving a direct financial link between Trent's skimming and a shell company owned by Castellano. It was overwhelming. It was undeniable. It was not a restaurant dispute. It was a criminal conspiracy. The district attorney's office, under intense pressure from the press Elena had so carefully cultivated, announced a full-scale investigation into Castellano Enterprises for organized food fraud, extortion, and racketeering. Castellano was cornered, and a cornered animal is the most vicious. He launched his counterattack 48 hours later. It was brilliant. It was evil. At 10 in the morning, a news van and 2 ambulances screamed up to the Barcarolle. A woman, an actress I had never seen, was wheeled out of a nearby hotel on a stretcher, clutching her stomach, moaning that she had eaten takeout from our kitchen the night before. The almonds, she cried, loud enough for the cameras. It tasted like almonds. Within an hour, 3 more victims surfaced. The city health department, citing a public health emergency, arrived with a warrant to shut us down. A mass poisoning event, they called it. But I had anticipated this. I had known he would try to discredit the kitchen itself. When the health inspector, a different one this time, a stern-faced man with tired eyes, marched into my kitchen with a shut-down order, I was waiting. You are too late, I told him. Excuse me, young lady, he snapped. The kitchen has been on voluntary lockdown since 7 o'clock this morning. Nothing has been served. I led him to the walk-in refrigerator, and I have these. On a clean stainless steel shelf was a tray. It held 20 small, sealed, and dated glass jars. These are my counter samples. I took a sealed, retained sample of every single dish that was prepped for service yesterday. Every sauce, every garnish, every protein, every item that woman could have possibly ordered. The inspector was stunned into silence. I also, I continued, have a mobile laboratory parked at the curb. Elena's final, beautiful chess move. A team of private food safety technicians, hired by Elena, wheeled their equipment into the empty dining room. The food bloggers, the real ones, the ones who valued truth over spectacle were already there, live streaming the whole thing to the entire culinary community. The test was simple. They tested the victim's contaminated takeout box. Then they tested my sealed counter sample of the exact same dish. The results came back in 20 minutes. The lab technician, a woman with a no-nonsense face, held up the 2 printouts for the cameras. "The sealed sample from the Barcarolle kitchen is 100% clean," she announced, her voice clear. "The sample from the takeout box is contaminated with a significant non-food grade industrial amygdalin compound, the bitter almond compound. The food was poisoned, but it was poisoned after it left my kitchen." Castellano had faked the entire event. He had poisoned his own people to frame me. The online chat for the live stream exploded. The food community, which had been wary, turned on Castellano with a vengeance. They had been lied to. They had been used, and they were furious. This was the moment, the final turn. I saw him, Domenico Moretti. He was standing across the street, just watching. He saw the lab techs. He saw the press siding with us. He saw Luca, standing by the door, not with bodyguards, but with his lawyer, Elena, and his chef, me. Luca was not hiding. He was not using shadows. He was using science. Domenico watched his son win the war using a different set of rules. He looked smaller. He looked, for the first time, like an old man. He turned and walked away from the river, accepting that his time and his methods were over. The house of cards collapsed. With the fake poisoning exposed, the police had probable cause. They tracked Trent Doyle to a miserable, cash-only apartment in Queens. He was not a criminal mastermind. He was just a pathetic, greedy fool. He had $2,000 in a duffel bag and a case of the industrial almond oil. He confessed everything, implicating Castellano in the entire plot, begging for a deal. That afternoon, as I was scrubbing my kitchen, getting ready to finally, truly reopen, we watched it on the small television in Marisol's office. Rafael Castellano, walking out of his glass tower, his hands cuffed behind his back. He was not smiling. The district attorney charged him with multiple counts of endangering public health, extortion, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The war was over, and we had won. The Barcarolle did not reopen the next day. A small, simple sign was placed on the heavy wooden doors, closed for system upgrades, reopening in 48 hours. The city and the press loved it. The drama of the gala, the arrests, the spectacular fall of Rafael Castellano had given way to a new narrative. We were no longer just a restaurant. We were a story of redemption. The New York Times food section, which had once scrutinized us, ran a feature. The headline called "The Barcarolle, the restaurant cleaned by science and kindness." We were not just a kitchen. We were a case study. Inside those doors, it was not a cleanup. It was a revolution. Marisol Reyes returned, her son and sister safe, her eyes blazing with a fierce, protective energy. She and I stood side by side in the empty dining room. The staff gathered around us, their faces a mixture of exhaustion and hope. "The first thing we do," Marisol announced, her voice echoing in the quiet room, "is lock the brain." The point-of-sale system, Trent's personal bank, was completely reprogrammed. Every override, every voided check, every special service fee now required a 2-key authorization. One key was mine, the other was hers. My cheap, spiral notebook, the one filled with my obsessive notes on scent and temperature, was taken by Elena Voss. It returned the next morning, laminated, professionally bound and printed. It was now titled the Scent and Source Safety Handbook. It was mandatory reading for every employee, from the dishwashers to the hosts. My nose notebook was now official company policy. We tackled the tips next. Trent's skimming had poisoned the front of house and creating a culture of resentment. "No more," Marisol declared. We instituted a fully transparent digital tip pool. A monitor was installed in the staff break room, displaying the real-time breakdown. Honesty, like Luca said. We also established an anonymous hotline, managed directly by Elena's law firm, for any staff member to report anything that smelled wrong, from a bad shipment of fish to a manager with greedy hands. The safety net we were building extended beyond the kitchen walls. June continued her sessions with Dr. Ramirez, the security Elena had provided, the stability of my new role, the knowledge that the men in the cheap suits were gone forever. It all worked better than any medication. The crushing weight of her anxiety began to lift. She started visiting the kitchen, not as a guest, but as a helper. She gravitated toward the pastry station, a quiet, warm corner filled with the smells of vanilla and yeast. She was meticulous, her movements precise. She had a gentle, patient touch with dough. One afternoon, I looked over and saw her showing Leo, our new prep cook, how to fold the biscotti dough without overworking it. She was calm. She was focused. She was not the girl who saw monsters in the booths. "We could use a part-time pastry prep hand," Marisol said, coming to stand beside me. "She is better than Leo." June started the next day. She was put on the payroll, paid a full wage, plus her share of the new, transparent tip pool, the kitchen. Once the source of our family's greatest terror had become her sanctuary. Luca was changing, too. Franco, his longtime taster, was reassigned. He was promoted to head of receiving, a job he seemed immensely relieved to have. His new duty was to check every manifest against my handbook, a gatekeeper for the truth. And Luca began to eat. He would come by the restaurant, not for cloistered meetings in the private room, but for a simple bowl of pasta at the bar, in the open, surrounded by the noise and laughter of other diners. He stopped looking over his shoulder. But the real transformation happened late at night, after the last diners had left, after the kitchen had been scrubbed clean and the staff had gone home. He would arrive. He would find me in the quiet, my notebook open on the steel counter as I logged the day's inventory. "Teach me," he said one night, his voice quiet in the cavernous, gleaming kitchen. "Teach you what?" I asked, looking up from my figures. "How to cook," he said. "How to make it honest, like you do." So, I taught him. We started with the basics: how to hold a knife properly, how to let the weight of the blade do the work, how to listen to onions in a pan, to hear the exact moment the sizzle deepened, the signal that the sugars were releasing. He was a clumsy student at first, his movements too controlled, too stiff. He was afraid of the open flame, afraid of making a mistake. One night, he arrived carrying a heavy, cloth-wrapped bundle. He set it on the stainless steel counter with reverence. "This was my mother's," he said. He carefully unwrapped the cloth. It was a mortar and pestle. It was not a small, pretty spice grinder. It was massive, carved from a single heavy block of dark gray stone, the pestle worn smooth in the center from decades of use. "She used it for everything," he whispered, his hand resting on the cool stone. "Pesto, garlic, spices. She said the flavors were truer when they were crushed, not cut, that it took time, but it was honest." He looked at me, his gray eyes clear and deep. "I cannot think of anyone she would rather have this than you." My hands were shaking. I reached out and touched the stone. It was cold, but it felt alive, holding a latent warmth, a history. "Let's make risotto," I said, my voice thick. And so we did, in the vast, silent, empty kitchen, at 2 a.m, with no audience, no cameras, no poison, just the sound of the wooden spoon scraping the bottom of the copper pot, the smell of saffron and lemon and good Parmesan. He ate it standing right there, straight from the pan, his eyes never leaving mine. But my victory was not absolute. The win had left scars, sometimes. I would walk into the dry storage in a new bag of almonds, perfectly sweet, perfectly safe, would catch my nose wrong, the phantom scent, that metallic, chemical spike would return. I would find myself frozen, my hand at my throat, my heart racing. I was back at the gala, my fist clenched around the glass vial. I told Luca about it, my voice low with shame. The one thing I trusted, my nose, was now betraying me. He did not offer pity. He simply understood. "You are not afraid of the smell, Ava," he said, taking my hand. "You are afraid of the memory." He helped me. We began what I called scent meditation. He would bring me things. My eyes closed, a sprig of fresh rosemary, a cut lemon, a cinnamon stick, and eventually a single, sweet, whole almond. He taught me to separate the true scent from the shadow of the poison, to breathe in the truth, to reclaim the memory, to smell the almond and not the fear. The old guard was also learning. Domenico Moretti did not visit the restaurant. He did not call. But one day, Marisol showed me a press release from the Queen's Culinary Institute. The Moretti family, through a private foundation, had just endowed a massive new scholarship. It was not for haute cuisine. It was the Lucia Moretti Grant for Food, Science, and Safety. Elena Voss, however, was very present. She sat with me in my new, tiny office, the one that used to be Trent's. "You did well, Ava," she said, which from her was the highest praise. "You proved a theory. Transparency is not just good ethics, it is good armor." She leaned forward, her sharp, intelligent eyes fixing me. "The light is on, but light needs a switch keeper, someone to make sure the wiring is secure." "What does that mean?" I asked, my pen hovering over an invoice. "Moretti Foods is a massive operation," she said, laying out the facts. "The Barcarolle is the flagship, but we have dozens of other restaurants, supply chains, distribution. All of it is now, thanks to your public demonstration, under a microscope. Luca wants to clean the whole system." She pushed a heavy folder across the desk. It was a contract. "He is offering you a new role," she said. "Not a chef, not a consultant." She tapped the title printed on the first page. "Director of Culinary Integrity. For the entire legitimate operation, you would answer only to him and to me. You would have the authority to shut down any kitchen, fire any supplier, and rewrite any menu that does not meet the standards in that handbook of yours." I stared at the words, Director of Culinary Integrity. It was a life I could not have imagined in my wildest dreams. It meant leaving the kitchen floor. It meant leaving the daily service, the fire, the steam, the rhythm of the line. It meant hanging up my apron. It also meant stability. It meant June would be safe, forever. It meant I could ensure that no one, in any Moretti kitchen, ever had to smell that fear again. "I need to think about it," I said, my hand resting on the cover of the contract. Elena nodded, standing up. "Take your time, but know this, Ava, you stopped being a prep cook the night you served that soup. The only question now is what you want to build." A new season settled over Brooklyn, crisp and bright. The air, finally washed clean of the bitter almond scent, now carried the smell of roasting chestnuts from street carts and the sharp, clean brine of the river. At the entrance to the Barcarolle, the old, discreet brass plaque was gone. In its place hung a heavy, beautiful sign of dark, oiled walnut. It was carved with 4 simple words, "Built on truth and taste." I stood in my new office, the one that used to be Trent's, and signed the contract. The paper felt heavy, like a different kind of apron, a different kind of tool. I was no longer Ava Quinn, prep supervisor. I was Ava Quinn, Director of Culinary Integrity for Moretti Foods, Waitress. My first act was not in an office. It was in a kitchen, a different kitchen, one of the Moretti steakhouses in Midtown. I walked in, unannounced, during the lunch rush. The staff knew who I was. The gala had made me infamous in the best possible way. I did not yell. I did not threaten. I just watched, and I smelled. I tasted the prep lines. I checked the walk-in, and then I installed the system. The Scent and Source Handbook, my old notebook, was implemented in all 12 of the Moretti legitimate properties. The 2 key authorization for all voided checks and inventory overrides became the law. In the staff rooms, digital boards were hung, showing the transparent tip pool breakdown for every shift, and, at Marisol's insistence, we established the Employee Emergency Fund, funded by 1% of the house profits, to ensure no bartender or server ever fell into the kind of debt that forced a man like Owen to choose between his morals and his mother's health. My life, which had been a chaotic scramble from shift to shift, paycheck to paycheck, now had a new rhythm. It was a rhythm of audits, of training, of building. I was not just a cook, I was an architect. I was designing an operating system for ethics. The romance, if you could call it that, settled into the same quiet, steady rhythm. It was not loud, it was not dramatic. There were no grand gestures. Our love was not a fire. It was the hearth. It was the late nights, after the audits, after the spreadsheets, when I would find myself back at the barcarolle. The kitchen would be silent, gleaming, and he would be waiting. We would cook, often. We would use his mother's mortar and pestle, that massive, heavy stone. I would show him how to bruise herbs rather than chop them, how to release the oil from pine nuts slowly. The sound of the stone pestle grinding against the stone bowl, a steady, rhythmic clack, 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 became the sound of our peace. It was the sound of trust being built, grain by grain. He ate everything I made. He ate without hesitation, without a taster, without a shadow of fear in his eyes. He would eat, standing in the kitchen, his tie loosened, and he would watch me, his gaze quiet and full. He did not need to say anything. His trust was the loudest declaration of love I had ever heard. The healing rippled outward, touching the one person I thought was unreachable. It was a Tuesday night, early, just as the first dinner rush was starting. The kitchen was open, bright and calm. Marisol was at the pass. June, now our full-time lead pastry assistant, was piping lemon curd into tart shells. Domenico Moretti walked in. He did not ask for a private room. He did not come with an entourage. He was alone. He wore his dark overcoat, though the restaurant was warm. "A table," he said to the host, his voice quiet. "Near the kitchen, if you please. I like to watch the work." The restaurant went silent. Marisol froze. Luca, who was going over receipts in the office, emerged, his face tight. Domenico sat at the small two-top, the one closest to the heat and the noise. He sat where he could see everything. He saw the two-key system in action at the terminal. He saw the transparent tip board by the server's station. He saw June, carefully plating a dessert. He watched for a long time. Luca did not approach him. He let his father sit. Finally, Domenico signaled to a server. "The pastry chef," he said, gesturing with his chin. "The young woman, send her over." June, her face pale but her hands steady, wiped her palms on her apron and walked out. "You are Ava's sister," Domenico said. It was not a question. "Yes, sir," June replied. "The biscotti, the lemon ones, they were on the menu at the gala. Do you make them?" "Yes, sir, I do. It is my recipe. Well, it is our mother's, but I changed the zest." "Bring me one," he said, "with an espresso." June went back, plated a single, perfect lemon biscotti, and I watched her carry it out. Domenico Moretti picked up the cookie. He looked at it. He turned it over in his hand. He was not just looking at a cookie. He was looking at his wife's memory, made safe, made new. He dipped it into his espresso, the same way Luca had described. He took a bite. He chewed, slowly. He finished the entire cookie. He drained his espresso. He stood up, put a $100 bill on the small table, and looked at his son, who was standing by the office door. Domenico did not say a word. He just nodded. Once, a nod of acceptance, a nod of surrender. He walked out of the restaurant, and Luca finally let out the breath he had been holding for 20 years. The revolution spread. Other restaurant groups, seeing the massive public relations victory and the surge in business at the Barcarolle, began to copy our model. Transparency became the new buzzword in the New York food scene. Competing steakhouses started advertising their own source-verified menus. The Food Safety Association of America invited me, Ava Quinn, a culinary school dropout, to be their keynote speaker at their national conference. My speech was simple. I told them the truth. From a single waitress, an empire was learning a new language, a language of integrity. This was not a story about poison. It was never about the poison. It was a story about the taste of truth. I finished my work late that Friday. I was in my apartment, packing a small bag. Luca was taking me away for the weekend, somewhere with no kitchens, somewhere quiet. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, a new text message, an anonymous number sent through an encrypted service. Elena's people had many ways of talking. The message was short, 6 words. A big kitchen in Midtown. Smells bitter. It was not a threat. It was a tip. It was a call. The old fear, the phantom scent of almonds, did not rise in my throat. I did not freeze. I did not panic. I picked up the heavy, gray stone mortar and pestle, my mother-in-law's legacy, my tool. I looked at the message, and for the first time, I smiled at the challenge. I picked up my coat. "Let's go," I said. Thank you for listening to this story. Where are you listening from? Let us know in the comments so we can connect and share our thoughts. Please subscribe to my channel, Mafia Boss Stories. Like this video and support us further by hitting the hype button so this story can be heard by more people.